Mike Bolland's journey defies all odds and showcases the power of resilience and creativity. Mike's diverse and eclectic background includes roles as a former child actor, professional bowler, inventor, stand-up comedian, podcast host, and a nonprofit founder. Born without a right hand, Mike's inspirational story takes us from his early acting career in The Trial of Billy Jack to becoming a professional bowler, followed by a successful 30-year corporate career at Discount Tire. A cancer diagnosis in 2016 became a pivotal moment in Mike's life, prompting him to pursue his passions more vigorously, including founding a nonprofit for the limb loss community and starting the We're Not Stumped podcast. Join us as Mike shares his incredible journey, lessons he's learned about overcoming adversity, and his inspiring work to make the world a better place for the limb loss community. Don't miss this episode filled with motivation, humor, and insights into the true essence of the entrepreneurial spirits. As always, if you found value from this content, please like and subscribe. Now here's my conversation with Mike Bolland. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulis, and this week, my guest is a former child actor, professional bowler, inventor, stand-up comedian, podcast host, nonprofit founder, and he's done all of this single-handedly. Mike Bolland. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for having me. I was telling you off camera how excited I was to be on this podcast. I just love it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to hear about your entrepreneurial journey. If you could, for everyone, can you just give us some quick background on who you are and your backstory?
Yeah, my name is Mike Bolland. Been very lucky in my life. I was born without a right hand, but had great parents and great upbringing. Born in New Jersey, and we moved to Arizona in the early 70s. And unbeknownst to us, there was you mentioned the acting. I did it once, but there was a production company working with a prosthetic manufacturer here in Arizona when we first moved out here. And they were looking for a one-handed boy. So I got the part of Danny in The Trial of Billy Jack, which it's kind of one of those cult classics. It's old now, but it was the third highest grossing film of 1974. So that was fun. And then as you said, so I had a friend of mine ask me to join bowling league as a junior. And I was fortunate enough that I had passion and I wanted to practice, and I was able to take that all the way to the professional bowlers tour and had a good time doing that. You know, I was had my cup of tea out there, but one of the things about being on tour is you have to get backing really to stay out there, and I just wasn't able to secure the backing to stay out there long enough, and decided it was time to move on. And what I did was started working at Discount Tire, and recently, 2 years ago this month actually, they say retired, or I say, I guess after 30 years you can say retired from Discount Tire to pursue other passions. And when you talk about the entrepreneurial journey, everything that I'm doing is because of some of those past experiences I've had, and I'm kind of putting it together to try to do the nonprofit and my own podcast and things like that. So a lot of fun. Had a great life.
Yeah. So, I mean, being born with a big disadvantage of that, without a right hand. I mean, what was that like growing up? Because you seem to have such a great attitude and you've done all these things. I mean, what was it like growing up and just having to adjust to that way of life?
I really didn't have to adjust, but it's a great question. And the reason why I say that is because I've met some people now with what I'm doing that are born exactly like me. And what I call it is like the tale of two lives. So in my life, my parents were just so great at understanding what I needed as I grew up, and always allowed me, enough rope to either mess up or succeed. And they were always there for me, always in my corner, as were my brother and sister. So I never had a problem myself growing up. But when I talk about the tale of two lives and meeting other people like me, I know that's not always the case, unfortunately. And like I said, I met somebody exactly like me. I mean, you could put our stumps right next to each other and they certainly look quite a bit alike. And her story was so different. And it just made me realize how lucky I've been in life. Unfortunately for her, her parents were ashamed of her because of how she was born, and they'd cover her up in the bassinet. And it was something that the first day of elementary school was just traumatic, and having people make fun of her. And listen, I've had people make fun of me, and I'm not going to lie, but I was given the tools to get through that. And unfortunately for her, she wasn't. And then she got older, went to high school and looking for her first job, which, to be honest with you, I struggled finding work as well as a person in the limb loss community, but I was able to overcome it. Unfortunately for her, it led to years of depression. I'm glad now, later in life, she's doing well. But as far as my personal journey, it's been nothing but a pleasure having one hand. I don't know how you people walk around with those two things. I have no idea. I just like being the way I am.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. And so, like you said, you did the bowling, and then you had a very successful corporate career within Discount Tire,
Yeah.
and then you were diagnosed with cancer in 2016, and that was really a life-changing experience. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that is probably the biggest life-changing experience that I've ever went through. I was diagnosed in 2016 with throat cancer, and I really got lucky finding it. I just kind of had a scratch on my neck, itch on my neck, and I had a lump there and went to get it diagnosed and went through all those tests, and I was diagnosed with cancer. And there's a story I'd like to share with you. It was the first time after I officially got diagnosed, came home, told my wife, obviously, it was a tough day, real tough day. And she goes, "Do you want to go out and get something to eat? Just take your mind off of it." And I didn't even know how hungry I was, but I knew I can go for a glass of wine or four. That's the way I felt. One for each finger, one for each finger that I have. But it was one of those things. We went to a restaurant, and I remember we sat at the bar because there wasn't any seating. So we had to kind of work our way through the restaurant. And as I did, and I sat down, it was the first time in my life, and it dawned on me, this was so interesting. When I go into a restaurant or a NFL game or Walmart as an example, people look at me, right? They stare, and I'm okay with that, but I'm a little different, so people will look at me and stare. But this was the first time in my life when people looked at me and stared, and they thought, "Oh, I know what's wrong with him. He's got one hand." When really that wasn't what was wrong with me. What was wrong with me is that I had cancer. And it just made me look at things and people and life differently. And I'd like to think I was a good person before that episode for me, but it's made me look at other people because I looked across the restaurant and I thought to myself, how many stories are going on in this establishment, just this establishment, that are either similar to mine or maybe worse than mine? We're all going through something. And we can just be a little bit more respectful of people and understand that we're all trying to go through something. It make the world a better place. So that was one of my, slap me in the face moments. And of course, cancer also led to me deciding to change careers, I guess is a good way to put it, and do what I'm doing now.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned that too, is like that was almost like a wake up call in terms of like time is short and there's so many other things that you want to do, and that really motivated you to, like you said, start pursuing some of these other passions and these entrepreneurial aspirations you have. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there was a few things that I wanted to do. So while I was going through the cancer, and I elected to have surgery, and I went through radiation. And while I was going through all that, and hoping for the best, obviously, there's two things that I wanted to do if I came out on the other side. One was go back on the Pro Bowlers tour and hit one more stop, which I have not done. So I still am looking forward to do that. The second thing was to kind of give back to the community and try stand-up comedy. And when I say the community, like the limb loss community, what could I do to really dive in instead of trying to be like just a living example of what I do and how I do it? No, actually like kind of dig in and do some other things. One was I started a nonprofit called Joe Marie Bolland's Helping Hands. And I named it after my parents because of everything they did for me. And we have like four pillars of what we're trying to do. And the last on that list is helping with prosthetics. It's not the least important necessarily, but a lot of times when you have limb loss and it is something that happens in your life, there's other things that you really need to resource allocation. That's one of the things that we're trying to establish. What do you do? You're laying in a hospital. Where do you go? What do you do? Who's the prosthetist? And a lot of times the hospitals just say, well, you got to go here and see this person. Now we want to make sure that we're really thinking about the whole person, if that makes sense. Employment opportunities as well. That's one thing that I struggled with, and we want to make sure we make that better for everyone. And then lastly is peer support. Is there anything we can do to put you up with someone else that has gone through what you've gone through and make sure that they're giving you the wisdom and that shoulder to cry on at some point? So those are the four pillars that we're concentrating on that. And then lastly, I started my own podcast called the We're Not Stumped podcast, where I interview other people in the limb loss community. And that's the bulk of it. I'd say 80% of my episodes are interviewing others within the limb loss community. but I also expanded it because it's a journey, right? The limb loss community, and we I've had support people on there, like prosthetists. I've had prosthetists on there, people that make prosthetics, and I've also had caregivers on there. And because it all comes together to make sure that the person is getting what they need, and understanding that there is another side. And I just talked about that with an amputee yesterday, a recent podcast. There is another side. And sometimes you can't see that other side when you're laying in the bed, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get those stories out there to make sure that people understand there is another side, and your life will change for the better sometimes.
In my world, a personal brand is invaluable. A year ago, Easy DC was brand new with just a couple of customers and no online presence. Then I found Hicks Marketing. They helped me amplify my personal brand, build a solid content strategy, publish my podcast, and 10x the number of customers we serve, all in less than 1 year. Do you need a marketing partner who gets you and cares about your success? Reach out to Alicia at hicksmarketing.com for more info and tell her Dave Goulas sent you. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you've had the podcast about 2 years. Like in that time, interviewing all these amputees and just hearing their stories and really being so much more immersed in that world. Like how is that giving you new perspective?
Yeah, it has given me a lot of different perspective. I was able to meet that person who had a different life journey than I did, because I was just skipping through life happily. Hey, this is great. I mean, everyone's like me. If they are missing a hand or a limb, they're fine. They're well adjusted. And it's not always the case. And when I say well adjusted, I may be strong, but they're in their own journey to get better adjusted. And that's what I've learned more than anything. How this is a journey, and a lot of people in the limb loss community are going through their own journey and where they're at, and especially with the podcast. One of the things, probably the greatest compliment I ever had, was because it was part of the vision. Ashley Ramirez said this to me. She said, Mike, I was in a car accident. I was laying in bed and I didn't know what to do. I wasn't laying in a hospital bed. I didn't know where to go or what to do. I had no idea. My family wasn't in the town I was in. So what do? I did the same thing when I had cancer. You start Googling it. And sometimes that's the worst thing to do. You get on WebMD and you're like, you try to diagnose yourself like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But she came across the podcast and then found other people that had the same journey that she had. Bruce Manzan is a perfect example. A gentleman hit him. He was on a motorcycle. A gentleman hit him and he lost his leg. She listened to that episode, and it let her know that, hey, there's other people that have gone through what I'm going through, and they've come out on the other side and they're doing better. And their life actually is more fulfilled and complete sometimes. And that's the ultimate compliment, that I had someone tell me that. And, now I've had others also tell me that. But that is the ultimate compliment. That's what it was all about. And when we talk about the entrepreneurial journey, sometimes we scratch things on a piece of paper and you're like, well, here, I'm going to go from point A to point B. And we don't know what that journey is going to be, because it's just like, I'm looking up at the mountain. I just know I need to get to the top. And sometimes we don't know all the different successes and failures along the way. But when you have that kind of feedback, it lets you know that everything that you're doing, it was worth it, and to continue on and to keep pressing forward. So that's the answer. I know it's a long-winded answer, but having those times as an entrepreneur is just, there's no better feeling in the world.
Yeah, that's powerful. So now also you have an invention, right? That's a product you sell. It's called the two-fisted mug.
It's the two-fisted drinker, and I decided, hey, what the heck? I'll have it. It's water. It's a beer mug, but I have water in here now. It's not vodka, but no. And what you do is you can drink out of it, and there's a porthole between the two, and it's fun. It's been a fun thing, because what I was doing the marketing for Discount Tire, a commodity project or a commodity item, is so much different than doing a novelty item. But the sales are great. I have a lot of fun. I have 3 patents, 2 utility, 1 design patent, which is a lot of fun, even kind of talking about that through the entrepreneurial journey. I did go through some attorneys to make sure that I did that right. But now that I have everything, including the trademarks, I pretty much do everything myself through my USPTO website. So I know exactly when my patents are going to expire, and I redo those myself. I save money. doing it that way again because, I got to bootstrap some of this stuff. The Section 8 for the trademarks, I do that myself. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, inventing that, it's one of those things. It's like sales could always be better. I think all of us think that as an entrepreneur. But some of the things you'll learn through that journey, you just can't replace. And some of the things I learned through the Two-Fisted Drinker is helping me with We're Not Stumped and even the nonprofit, because you can take your talents and your learnings and apply them to other things. And that, to me, that's the funnest part about being an entrepreneur. Like learning that my USPTO, I didn't know about that a few years ago, but I've been doing my own renewals now for probably 4 or 5 years, and that saves a lot of money. It's bootstrapping. It's fun.
Yeah. So what was it like when you first had the idea, right, to just come up with an invention? And I don't know if you knew anything about patents or trademarks prior, but all the steps you have to go through and just turning an idea in your head into a tangible item. Like, what was that process like?
Oh, that's another one where, it's almost like you look downhill and you go, gosh, I can't believe I went that far. Yeah, it was an interesting thing. Some of my first prototypes didn't work as well as I was hoping it would be, which actually changed the design to probably a better design. Because sometimes when you're going down that journey again, you're like, I didn't want to I really was focused on a different design that I really wanted to get patented and move forward with it. But man, we just couldn't figure out a way to do it. So then this design came out, and I would highly recommend going through an attorney to do the initial one. And I did. And it was one of those things, you get the design together, then you're like, okay, now who can I have to manufacture this? Because then that presents challenges too. Just because you come up with an idea, can this thing be pressed, plastic pressed, or, injection molded? And how does that all go together? And I'll say that I'm not gonna say these were mistakes, but if I was going to do it over again, I probably would have. I went through a manufacturer in China that I'm happy with, and we have a great relationship. But I probably would have tried to be a little bit closer, whether it be Mexico or the United States. I did try to go through the United States at first, through some manufacturers here, but I didn't have any experience, so they were like, I don't know if we want to take a chance on, And I get it, they're in the business too, and I ended up finding like the manufacturer in China, but getting that product to the United States is, can prove costly at times, as you probably know, but it's part of the learning, right? It's part of the learning. And like I said, if I was going to do that all over again, I probably would fight harder to have it manufactured here in the States, but you live and learn.
Yeah. Okay. And then if people want to check out the Two-Fisted Drinker or purchase it, where can they find that?
It's on twofistedDrinker.com, and then it's also on FBA, so Amazon Prime. I have it on Amazon Prime.
Excellent. Okay. Now also another big part of your entrepreneurial activities is your corporate speaking. So how'd that come about?
It was one of those things that really came out about through through the cancer. It was something that I wanted to give back. And my message through the speaking is really not necessarily a message about me. It's about the leadership that my parents gave me that enabled me to be a person that just continues to move forward, all because of their attitude. And I've done lucky things. So when it comes to the speaking, I talk a lot about like growing up with one hand, and the fact that my parents, gosh, at a time where there wasn't YouTube or Google, they made it work. They figured it out, and that's tremendous leadership. So when I do corporate speaking, I talk about the leadership aspects of my parents, and of course, I even throw comedy. You got to throw comedy in there. I love having one hand, so I always start out with comedy, and I'll tell you why I do that, especially when it comes to the speaking, because I have to make sure that the defenses are down for the people that are in the audience. I want them to know that it's okay to accept me and self-deprecating, laugh at me and my jokes because I have one hand, and that really sets the tone for what I talk about a little later on, which I talk about my tremendous acting career, which is terrible. But I show some scenes from the movie I was in, and I was a little scared little kid, and it was fun. I mean, then I show some scenes of me being interviewed before I was on the Pro Bowlers tour. So I talk about those kind of things, and let people know that if you have a dream, work towards it, keep going. And then I talk about my career at Discount Tire, and they took a chance on me. I started out working in the stores with one hand, and that was something I had to prove. And I think it's right. I'm not going to say it was a wrong thing. I had to prove that I could change tires with one hand. I wasn't just hired off the street, where if I had two hands, I would have been. But there's a safety aspect when it comes to changing tires and doing it correctly. So I was okay with that. If you need me to prove myself, I'd be happy to do it. And I spent 5 years in the stores. And then I was able to re-educate myself, learn how to build websites, went on to work at corporate and build our first intranet, some of our first online ordering systems. And I talk about that in the talk. So I know I'm kind of going astray. And then I talk even about the We're Not Stumped podcast. And that's kind of how the speaking goes. And I show some excerpts of that, of some incredible people that have been on the podcast that their stories are just, I sit in awe of what they've been able to accomplish despite some of their own very challenging journeys. And that's really what it is in a nutshell. I kind of talk about all the great people that have come into my life that have made me successful, and hopefully that people can impart their impact on the world themselves. Sometimes we think we're just one insignificant person, but you have the ability to make it better for other people. And that's really the message I try to get across because of the others in my life through my speaking.
Wow. Okay. Is there any of all the podcast episodes that you've done, is any one that stands out as just like, wow, I'm so in awe of this person, what they've overcome?
They're all like, this is the way I describe it. They're all like children to me. So it's hard for me to say that one did more than the other, but I'll talk about a couple highlights. Just the other day, I think I may have told you, I interviewed a band called The Resilient, and there were three of them are amputees through the military, and they are a band that are kicking butt and taking names. A gentleman that is missing both of his legs and part of his right arm. He's the drummer. It's just quite a story, and they're just doing great things. I mean, I can't, that one I'm editing it right now, so that one's not live. It's going to go live next Tuesday, but that's one in particular. Tracy LaMarche is another one. She hurt her knee working out. She was a bodybuilder. She happened to hurt her knee working out. Didn't think anything of it. Well, she went in for surgery, led to infections, and she lost her right leg above the knee. And that didn't stop her. She continues to get on stage. And she talked about on the podcast, she talked about the first time getting back on stage as an amputee and whether she was going to be accepted. And she was. And it is such a great story. And then I'll end with this one because Carter Viss, a gentleman out of Florida, he was snorkeling off of Florida safely using all the guidelines that were available at the time. Well, unfortunately, someone didn't see him and ran him over, and he lost his right arm, kind of like me, but higher up. And he also had injuries to his legs. Well, he turned that story. First of all, he's working with the person that hit him, which is an amazing accomplishment. And what a great person he is, Carter Viss. They've started the Carter Viss Foundation in Florida. And what they're doing is they're making snorkeling better by inventing a new buoy that makes it easier to see people in the ocean. So he's hoping through his experience that other people don't get hit. I mean, those are just some of the, I can keep going. It's amazing. The people that I get to meet have made me a better person, and their stories are just spectacular.
Yeah, that's inspiring, for sure. Particularly that last one, right? Just having that type of the ability to do that after being in such a terrible accident.
Yes.
All right, and Mike, so our audience primarily is other entrepreneurs and high performers and people that deal with all sorts of their own adversity. And being someone that's overcome so much and being immersed in this community where you get to hear these stories, what's one piece of advice you'd give to other entrepreneurs that may be facing difficulty or adversity in their own journeys as what they can do to overcome that?
From the people that I've talked to in my own personal experience, I think it's just keep moving forward. If you have a vision and a dream and you believe in it, keep going, keep moving forward. There's going to be roadblocks. That's just the reality of life. There's going to be roadblocks, but keep moving forward, continue on your dream to be what you want to be. And don't let the naysayers say it's not possible. You're going to hear that. You're definitely going to hear that. People are going to say, no, that's not a good idea. I had a gentleman on just last week. He invented a new medicine opener, and he had people telling him, that's not a good idea. And it's for people with dexterity or limb loss problems where you can open it with one hand. It's called Snap Slide. He continued to move forward, and he invented that product, and he's making people's lives better. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but keep moving forward, keep your vision, keep pushing. If you believe in it, do it, make it happen. And I know, again, there's going to be roadblocks. It's going to be tough, but keep moving forward.
Love that advice. All right. So, Mike, if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about the different projects you have, or reach out to you for any reason, what's the best way people can get in touch with you?
My main website is mikebolland.com, MikeBolland. And that's the main one. And that would incorporate the Two Fisted Drinker, my speaking, the We're Not Stumped podcast. Everything kind of lives on that website. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Okay. And we'll link all that in the show notes for everyone.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Yeah, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Had a great time talking to you. Really appreciate
I,
it.
the pleasure is mine. I was telling you how excited I was to be able to talk about the entrepreneurial journey. And I think you're doing a great thing with this podcast because it's hard to keep moving forward. So what you're doing is helping many others. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.